So today's video is going to be a Q&A with some questions that I got from Instagram about remote teaching. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Kafoople here. I thought that I would do a little bit of a series on remote teaching. I've had so many questions about it. So today's video is going to be a Q&A with some questions that I got from Instagram about remote teaching. I do have a couple of tips for you and a couple of insights that might be helpful for you in your situation. All right, so question one says, how do you keep your sanity while you can't really escape work since it's now at home with you? Okay, so that is very true. And I was just saying how it was hard for me to find a space to film this video because every room in the house has got people in it or stuff in it that's just like scattered around everywhere, and it kind of permeates your life. It is hard to separate. But a couple of tips for you. I really try to have a knock-off time, so I try to be offline, unavailable for my students by 4 p.m. every weekday. I think it's really important to keep up with some of your other interests and your other hobbies that you can engage in that are, you know, kind of house-based because we're in isolation at the moment. So I think it's really important to keep those interests up. You know, things like, for me anyway, reading, YouTube. I've started digging up my garden again out there and trying to get that up and running again. Reading. I know my kids are doing sort of jig puzzles and stuff like that. So I think that if you can have the knock-off time and maintain those interests and hobbies and intentionally make time during the day for you to do those things is really important. My husband is very strong on this as well. He's a teacher as well. Definitely recommend doing, like, having your recess time at recess and your lunch time at lunch, and you know, moving away from your workspace to go and have, you know, a few stretches or move around. Sometimes I go and throw the washing on, or, you know, and prepare something in the kitchen and then go and sit elsewhere. We've been sitting out on our other deck. We have a few decks in our house. We have 3 decks and 1 patio. So yeah, go sit somewhere, find some sunshine or just some fresh air and go away, like physically away from where you are working, especially because you're like at the computer all day. I think there's a question about that a little bit later on, so I'll deal with that then. What is my routine? So guess what happened on the Friday of the first full week of remote teaching? I thought, and if you follow me on Instagram you would know this, because I said, I'm gonna do a routine, like day in the life. I forgot to charge my camera battery and my camera battery went flat, and I was able to keep doing it on Instagram, but yeah, so that's a video I'd like to do when school goes back and get that done. So my routine is, and this has been a directive for us, like I follow the school timetable. So if I've got year 8 period 1, year 9 period 2, year 10 period 3, then that's what I follow, and I'm available to those students at those times. I prepare everything beforehand, so everything's prepared usually on Sunday, which is sort of my routine anyway, except that I leave a bit to do like as I go through, but I prepare everything beforehand and I just set it to release on Google Classroom at 9 a.m. on the day that I've got that particular class. And then I'm available to those students so that if they have questions, or I can interact with them. If I feel like we need to do a live lesson, then I can jump on live, but I'm there all the time. And the beauty about Google Classroom is that it has an app which I have downloaded on my phone. So I get notifications if the students ask me questions throughout the day. I ignore those though at my knock-off time. I think it's really important to have boundaries. What's the most effective way to teach remotely? The most effective way to teach remotely is the simplest way, and the way that suits your manner of teaching normally. I would not introduce very many new platforms. Fortunately for me, we were already using Google Classroom, so I just continued with that. And also fortunately for me, Australia was a bit behind the other countries in the world, and so we could kind of see what was happening. And I spent a lot of time telling my students, like when we were still at school, and our schools like stayed open, like they're still actually technically open when the term goes back. And so I kept saying to the kids, you know, if we close, this is what's going to happen. If we close, make sure that you do this, make sure that you check here, and this is how I'm going to communicate with you, and these are the types of lessons that I will be giving you, and blah, 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 that kind of stuff. So I was really lucky in that I could forewarn my students and explain a lot of things to them. And I know that in other countries they didn't have that option because it was just like their school closure was kind of immediate and they didn't have any time to do anything or to communicate anything to their students. So the most effective way is to try to stay as close as possible to your normal way of doing things. It's actually really, really tiring, exhausting, doing, especially if you're doing a lot of live lessons, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. So be really kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself and give yourself some grace, and also your students some grace, because this is something we've never done before. It's not even the same as distance education. You know, distance education have their lessons all laid out, and it's something that the family and the students have either chosen to do, or because of their circumstances, that's their only option for education. So it's a very different approach. We're trying to take an mainstream or a typical way of doing education and do it remotely. So it's quite different. So yeah, show yourself grace, and your students as well, and be kind to yourself. You don't have to do everything that you see on Facebook or Instagram. You just have to do what works for you and your students. And to be honest with you, that's going to be a work in progress. Like, you're going to be tweaking things constantly and refining things and figuring out what works for you and for your students, and then adjusting as you go along. So I think for me to say to you the most effective way to do it is this way would not be really, I mean, I couldn't impose on you what I'm doing with my students, because it all depends on your context. But yeah, just stick as closely as you can to what your normal is, and keep it very simple and kind of streamlined. You don't have to have all the bells and whistles. How much live stuff do you do? Okay, so when we started, anyone in New South Wales, you might be was similar to me. So when we started, oh, I wish I could remember the dates. I kind of wish that I remembered all of my thought processes and stuff. Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh gosh, I'm so ADHD today. Oh yeah, so when we first started to get an inkling that, you know, schools might close, or certainly that education was going to be impacted in a major way, I remember on that Monday, I think the Premier of New South Wales had announced that parents were encouraged to keep their students home. We thought that the schools were going to be closed, but they weren't. And all of a sudden we had Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, and then the attendance just dropped off. Kids just stopped coming to school. So those first few days, which were kind of up in the air, we were told to deliver remote lessons to the students whose families have kept them home, but deliver that to the students who are coming to school still. So we had this really weird situation of students sitting in front of us. I mean, you know, daily the attendance was dropping down. We still had like quite a few kids coming. So what I did for a few days was I was doing a live lesson. I had three things in mind, okay? I had the students in front of me in mind, so that I was, you know, talking with them. I had the students at home who were watching live in mind, and then I had students who were at home but not present in the live lesson. So I thought, okay, I'll record it for them. And like, I was doing this, I did this for a couple of days, and I remember I had like 4 lessons in a row one day, and I came back into the staff room and I just said to my colleagues, I said, I'm exhausted, I cannot do this. And they're like, you know, you don't have to do a live for every single lesson. And I said, well, I know that, but I kind of felt like I should. And yeah, those were the early days, and I can't do it. I can't do a live every single lesson. So what was the question again? This is such a mess, this video. How much live stuff do I do? Very little now. I found in that last week, just before we went on our Easter holidays, our autumn holidays, that I just did year 12 as a live lesson. What I was doing leading up to that point was I was offering a live lesson to students during that time, during their timetabled period. And I'd say, look, I'm here. If you want to do a live, we can have, you know, I can answer some questions. We can have a chat, a check-in. I'm happy to do that. And I would just wait and see what the comments were coming back. So it seems like the kids are preferring to sort of type questions, then that's fine by me. But the year 12s, and I think also year 11, really, really appreciate it. That's been my experience anyway. Your experience might be different, I don't know. Like I said before, play it by ear, be willing to tweak things and be flexible. And you know, that's what I love about teachers. We've just adapted and evolved, and we're trying new things. And I just think, if you're a teacher right now, you are amazing, amazing. And don't be too hard on yourself. What have you tried that hasn't worked well? I've kind of already answered that with the lives. So trying to do the lives every single lesson didn't work for me. I found it exhausting. Probably a lot of you are noticing that the students are getting through the work a lot quicker, of course, than they would if they were in the classroom environment, because there's lots more going on in the classroom environment, and you know, there's discussion and talking and classroom management and all this kind of stuff, whereas that's just like streamlined when it's remote teaching, and so they're going to get through the work faster, which is fine. And I think the tendency normally for teachers, it's a fine line. You've got to really weigh up how much more will I give them. I don't think we should overload them with work, because they're going through a lot of changes as well in their lives. They're, you know, some of them are a bit traumatized by this whole thing. So I think we just need to be very careful. Make sure that we're giving them valuable educational activities, yes, but don't just overload them. How are you ensuring less enthused students aren't falling behind? So my school is working on that, because it's become evident that, you know, there are students there who are less enthused. Remember how I said that I was lucky that I got to speak to my students about what could happen in the future right at the beginning? So I told them, I said, you know, if you are doing your work and stuff, I'm going to give you a house point. I'm going to reward you. I know that giving a house point isn't really a big deal, but it's, you know, just something little and something to say, hey, I recognize that you're putting in some effort, and that's really great. And that's sort of my style anyway. I much prefer to reward something that's been done well rather than punish something that's not being done. Also, my school is now putting in place just some systems. We're trying to get some systems in place to sort of acknowledge which students are not engaging, because that could become something that we need to follow up if this goes on for a long time. It's interesting that coming out of the woodwork towards the end of last term, where lots of families contacting the school saying, hey, we've got internet issues, or we don't have enough devices to go around our family, which is a very real issue. I mean, in my family, you know, when it comes to laptops, I'm sharing my laptop with my son. Families don't have a laptop per person necessarily. So I think that that's a very real issue. So what we've found is that lots of families have approached the school and they're asking for sort of hard copies of things, booklets. And also some students are not, they're not responding very well to the online stuff, exclusively online stuff. So I had one parent say to me, my son is just not, I think he needs something to hold. I think he needs a pen and a paper or a booklet to be able to do his work, because the screen is not working for him, which is, you know, that's a very valid concern, a valid thing. So of course I've provided that family with what they need. All we can do is follow the school systems as they come into place. And I believe rewarding rather than punishing. I don't see there's any point in punishing. Just being also just very aware, like you would in the classroom. You know, you're very in tune with your students. You communicate and you've got that relationship. We've still got a relationship with our students. It's just changed format. So just constantly like giving them daily messages and reaching out with positive reinforcement and saying, look, contact me, send me a message through Google Classroom and I will get it, because I will be online from this time to this time. Have your boundaries, because otherwise, you know, some of these kids, I've had messages come through at 2 a.m. and stuff like that. I refuse to look at them, of course, but you know, and I said to them, you can send me a message anytime you like, but I won't respond unless it's in school hours. So yeah, communicate and I think also acknowledge for them that this is something new and different and weird, and that we're all trying to navigate it together. So feel free to, you know, say stuff if you're not comfortable, or if you're unsure, or if it's not working for you. I think that's really important. Did that answer the question? I think it's important too for us to remember that parents aren't teachers. They don't have the same skills and experiences that we have. So when you're giving instructions, try to be very explicit and succinct, and encourage the student, especially if they're older, encourage the student to contact you rather than bothering their parents with stuff unnecessarily. I mean, you know, of course, parents who value education are going to want to support their children anyway, but parents are home working. They have their own stuff that they've got to do. It's interesting to me that, you know, society is talking about parents homeschooling their kids, and I don't think that that's the way it is or the way that it should be, because we're educating them and we're just doing it in a different way. That's all the questions that I have for today. I'm sure that there'll be more questions that arise throughout this whole journey. So if you would like me to do another Q&A, feel free to send me some questions and tell me in the comments if that's what you would like. But also make sure that you like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, teach well, live well, and be well.